Dr. Brogan, welcome to the action. You're very much a leader in so many ways. That's why you're opening up the show for people. I need you to tell people who you are, and I'll fill out any gaps that I want you to tell them about. So tell the world, who's
Yeah,
Brogan Williams?
you're going to ask all the provocative questions. Is that how it works?
More than likely, you'll expose them anyway.
You're going to make sure that it's an interesting episode. Yeah, I'm Brogan Williams.
What's
I
your
am
journey?
my journey, or currently a board certified exercise physiologist, which you may or may not be familiar with, depending on where you are from around the world. But to put things really, really simply, we use exercise as an intervention to help people get better, whether it's general health or whether it's a specific rehabilitation musculoskeletal issue. But in terms of me,
Hmm.
oh, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, Dr. Locke. Um, out of school, I was a musician and I learnt the art and the skill of getting better and getting good at something. And the only way of achieving that is through sweat, tears, and years and hard work. So I was like, everyone around me is better than me at guitar. How do I get better? 8 to 12 hours a day. Did I sleep? No. I could get away with it because I was young. Transitioned into an internship, Bible school, many, many years as a pastor, working with youth out in South Auckland here in New Zealand. Having the opportunity to kind of lead people, grow in my leadership, help people. It was fantastic. Eventually got married and transitioned out of that and made the decision to go back and study. Up to that point, I had always been a powerlifter and I had always been a coach because when I was 13, I was getting bullied by the captain of the first 15 team. And my friend said to me, he could dumbbell curl 15 kgs. And he goes, if you could bench a lot, like they'll respect you. That's a currency of respect, right? Because I played rugby my whole childhood, but I didn't play rugby when I went to college, when I went to high school. So I said, okay, let's give it a go. So I spent a little bit of time figuring out how to train, and there was this German guy who taught me how to train, very basic back then. And with almost no training, I did 120 kgs for 5 reps. Now, the captain of the first 15 rugby team could do 100 kgs for one. And so I immediately bought myself a lot of respect. And I like that. I like the feeling of training. I like being big and strong. I was obsessed. Trained all through school. Even when I was a musician, even when I was a pastor, I was coaching and powerlifting. That most certainly became a big part of my life and was able to go around the world champion with the IPL, was the first person, New Zealand powerlifter on New Zealand soil to lift 400 kgs raw with wraps. Did that twice and two separate meets. So that was a New Zealand overall all-time record and then also a GPC all-time record here in New Zealand, and really achieved everything I wanted to with strength. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm married, I'm having kids now, transition out of the pastor role because that was a very intense role, very intense. But I still wanted to do something that I was interacting with people. So I was a coach, I was helping people, and I kept coming up against the same problem. And that problem was no matter how much of a good job I did with people, my clients would always find themselves going to the chiro or the osteo or the physio or the GP and getting told to stop lifting. When I would try and reach out to work with the physio, occasionally I would get, handwritten notes handed to the client, handed to me eventually. Occasionally I'd get some rude emails, but most of the time I'd get zero. Physios weren't interested, chiros weren't interested, they osteos weren't interested in dealing with a strength coach. So I was like, I need to re-educate and rather than beating the problem, join the problem, fix it from within. So I thought, what do I want to do? I looked around, decided, okay, I'll go to chiro school. So went to AUT, studied science. I was in the lab coat. We're doing, physics and applied physics and microbiology. And, we've got the lab coats on. We're doing all the sciences. This is, lots of fun. Eventually transitioned through that, did my PT certifications, strength certifications, did a bunch of training on the sides, got into chiropractic college. Pretty much kind of like 3 years into that journey, we started to see patients. So I started to see patients in the clinic, and we had to start making decisions. So that first 3 years you're learning about philosophy, clinical rationale, but they were teaching us how to make clinical decisions based on philosophy, based on information that's 120 years old. Eventually it kind of came to a point where I was being told by the mentors to make decisions based on a philosophical outlook for a clinical outcome.
And
And
those
I just I
philosophies came from.
well, D.D. Palmer,
Yeah.
specifically, if that's what you're going for.
Yeah.
DD Palmer, eventually BJ Palmer came in. He brought in the hole-in-one. Eventually, Gonstead came in with treating the spine from the pelvis up. BJ Palmer was about treating it from the cervical down, so the atlas down with the high velocity toggles. I did all that. I got straight A pluses and A's in all of the techniques and Gonstead and diversified. I was a great adjuster, but it was unethical for me to look at my patients and treat them clinically based on philosophical principles, which a lot of people agree and everyone knew it was happening. But by the time you move into seeing people, you're already $10,000 to $100,000 in debt, depending. No one's going to pull out at that point. So everyone just kind of grits their teeth. And the last kind of year and a half, which I ended up obviously not doing, is you kind of kissing up to mentors and doing what they tell you. I decided, you know what? I disagreed with a mentor on a very sensitive topic. My patient was going through some mental health issues, and he was trying to connect those with thoracic misalignments. I felt like it was unethical, so I walked. And I met around this time is when I actually met you. We started talking, Aaron from Squat University, a few other people that were very pivotal in my journey. And I transitioned into Masters of Sports Science. And from there, I was out of the program, up the creek without a paddle, so to speak. And a lot of my friends wanted to make the decision, but couldn't because it was a hard place to be in. Plus, I was a little bit older. And like I said to you, I had a whole life of coaching and powerlifting. And I had a lot of wins on the board. So I had the confidence to say no. I had confidence to say my integrity is everything, and it still is. Sports science was an absolute world. And I just put the yards in, and you've seen it. I've been able to work with you, and I've been able to work with Aaron. I've been able to work with neurosurgeon, obviously David. Been able to work with so many other people in the industry, and just build up more wins on the board, more wins on the board. And then over the last couple of years, working on the PhD under David Johnson, with again neurosurgeon who is also director of the CFMC, as you are. I'm part of the CFMC as well, College of Functional Movement Clinicians. I was able to kind of sculpt a PhD thesis around the importance of technique, around the importance of lumbo-pelvic efficiency and movement. And a big part of that was working with Dr. David Johnson. Gave me the green light to go into his world and to look at 290 sets of data of his patients that came to him at the absolute end of their rope and agony and said, I need you to fuse my spine. And he said, no, we're going to get you moving better, right? Dr. David Johnson put a gym in a hospital. Like, this guy is he's a rock star. He's a neurosurgeon, but he's a rock star. And he said to these people, no, we're going to put you through movement proficiency training, right? And he's got his points of performance. But really what he did is he took these people through, like I said, lumbo-pelvic efficiency, core stability, endurance, and these, one by one, man, the results are astonishing. So we did a pilot study, and that was 10 participants, and we did the full study, 290 participants data. That is currently being peer-reviewed. It's a big part of my thesis. So, it's just been a absolute whirlwind. And then I had to engage with the material to pass boards to be an exercise physiologist, which took me about a year and a half. That was a long journey as well. And so I passed it at the start of this year. And it's been a journey. And along the way, obviously, I've been able to meet amazing people like yourself. And now I'm involved with the lumbar leadership course and loving it, loving the material, loving the vibe. Really, it's just awesome to be together with a bunch of legends and people that are experts in their fields. And the cool thing about it is that although everyone's bringing something to the table, we all have our eye on the prize. Like, what is the next 12 months going to look like? What's it going to look like at the end of these 12 months where we are even more clinically efficient at finding the root cause and treating it, and not just falling back on nonsensical ideologies that are pushed, like non-specific back pain and like technique doesn't matter.
It's a
Does that wrap it
beautiful,
up?
it's a beautiful summary of a very long career of dealing with human beings. And that's what you're finding currently now, because you're the online guy that a lot of people are searching out. And of course, this is different because so many people are used to the bricks and mortar practice. Now, we deal a lot with the online world. We're seeing people from all different countries. And it's been your real new dive, hasn't it? Wow, the skills you suddenly are confronted with. How have you found that transition?
It's been difficult. I think the first thing people want to say is they want to pull down the approach of online. I think it's easy for people to be negative. The first thing they go to is, can this work? How can this work? But really, I've had a playbook to follow among many legends, and you stand on the shoulders of legends, and you've been one of those people I've been able to ask and learn from. But I think when it comes down to online consultations, it's the precision. You have to be precise. It's that kind of that's the one thing that's lacking across the board in the curriculums and the universities is teaching these people that are going to be face to face with patients that are going through real hard times and painful experiences. You can't sit there and say, A, it's non-specific, or B, it's in your own head. That's piss poor. That's not enough. That's not adequate. So when it comes to online, the onus is even more on us as the clinician to be even more precise. And I tell you, it's not easy. But step by step, you do what you can, and you're dealing with people. So it comes with a required skill of how to deal with people, interaction, communication, and compliance.
And that's one of your massive skills that perhaps you didn't realize you have is your years of pastoral care dealing with distressed people. You were doing that under a different framework, but now you're dealing with a scientific framework and you're dealing with distressed people. You have such a huge understanding of human beings. And that can get lost sometimes a little bit when you're concentrating on the science as we do. And I know that gets you a bit because you're an empathetic individual.
An idealist.
Yeah, truly the idealist. What a great thing to be. We all have our ideals. So how have you found the ability to tap into your ability to work with distressed human beings who are now online patients?
Yeah, I think the biggest part of it is when you're establishing the first connection with someone is that, you're establishing a connection that's based on honesty, based on you being genuine in your approach to get them better. And if people see that, their walls come down a little bit. But then you've got more wall to get over before they start trusting you. It's one thing to be like, you have to do everything I say, and if you don't, it's not my program and I can't help you. And I certainly get to a point where those words, those very words, I will utter to my patients at some point. But from the very outset, from the beginning, it's like step by step. You're never going to be able to communicate 2 tons of truth over a 1 ton bridge. And so it's building the infrastructure between you and your patient from the immediate second that Zoom call comes on, or they walk through that door. I know Miguel talks about this in terms of an assessment purpose. He's looking for an antalgia gait. He's looking for, the mechanics of the foot, the knee to the glute, the hip, whatever. And it's similar to that, but it's also that in terms of the person's personality, temperament, and the things they're saying, and the way they're talking about their situation or the way they're talking about what they're going through. Being empathetic is a fantastic upside and it's a fantastic gift. And it can be useful in certain stages of the program and certain stages of meeting someone. At the flip side, it can be a negative. It can be a struggle. It can be an added thing on that you have to learn how to work around or work over or work through, where you're doing too much for the patient or you're doing too much communication and the other patient's not doing their bit. It has to be both of you coming together, like I said, communication and compliance.
And let's talk about self-care as a therapist in that sense, because that's a lot of what people have to learn is how hard it is not to get involved beyond the end of that conversation and take it away and have it in the back of your head so much. How have you found that? That's a tough one.
It's difficult, being a pastor, it was hard because the phone never goes off. If you're on holiday, if you're out with friends, if you're at the birth of your child, the phone never goes off. And that's what was expected of me from my oversight, from my mentors, my pastors. And so in that sense, it was difficult then. The difference obviously now is I get to establish my own boundaries and I'm in control. So like you said, you don't want to take things into the rest of your life because the hard thing about it is that you're not going to be as efficient for every patient you're seeing if you're worrying about the one you've just seen. Now, it's easier said than done. Being an empathetic person, I do find it hard. because you finish the call and you're still thinking about that person because it's a human being who's going through pain. And often it's not just pain. I mean, if this person's been dealing with an issue for 10, 20 years, they have facilitated neurology where they're being bombarded with these pain signals constantly, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And honestly, in many cases, when you're dealing with someone in chronic pain, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to bring on a psychologist. Clearly, that's not our job, and I know too many physios are playing that game, right? But in this situation, our job is to, locate the biomechanical aspect of things, and it can be difficult to do it online, but you have to deal with the personable, you have to deal with the person as well. Sometimes I hang up the call and I've been thinking, man, what can I do? And I'm thinking about the person's situation, and then I'll text you about it. And I would love to sit here and act like I have it all together and that I've got everything down and that I am the most efficient person always, but I'm not. I am an emotional person, and it's a strength, it's not a weakness. Use it as your strength, right? And when it becomes a weakness, be open enough to ask your mentors for help, which I did to you 2 days ago. And then when the mentor turns around and says it's actually your problem, be humble enough and self-aware enough. I mean, if there was one thing I could say to people, be self-aware. Self-aware, self-aware, self-aware. Be self-aware enough to say, hey, it is my problem. Let me go back to the drawing board. And today, all morning, back-to-back patients, what was I thinking about? Those words you told me. How can I be better based on what you told me, rather than me trying to make excuses for why you're wrong and I'm right?
It's the biggest part, isn't it? When we take self-responsibility, I find it's very easy because you got your focus. And that's, well, we're in a profession, and every day we breathe, every day we're trying to be better at what we do. It doesn't matter what area of life. As a family man, of course, you've got a lot of parts of you which are having to be serviced. And sometimes you servicing yourself for your care helps everybody else.
It's a very good point, especially with family, eh?
Mm. And that's a great part of us as professionals. And here's you taking on the online world. And yes, some of the cases you're going to get are going to be really interesting and superb. But often, as we say, biomechanics gives us our key, doesn't it? You get back under there and you know what the person essentially is doing to stimulate the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to trust the process without ego. I think the number one thing, if you were to move, if you say, okay, look, self-awareness, absolutely crucial. But what comes with self-awareness? I often find that the absence of ego is kind of being self-aware and thankful for what you have. So taking the ego out of what you're doing, are we always going to get everybody better? No. How do we refer? How do we find someone that's going to help that person? Because it's not about me, it's about them, right? We do our best. And similarly, when you're the one on the other end, I just recently had a patient that has seen three of the best in the industry, period. I'm not going to go into names. You will know all three names. You know all three names. Everyone listening to this will know all three names. They've gone to the best in the industry and they have not been able to get him better. Now they're coming to see me. And I'm sitting there going, what have they missed? It's not about ego, right? I'm self-aware. What have they missed? What could be the downfall for someone let's say someone who's the greatest in the world at fixing backs, and someone goes to see them and they don't get better? What's the downfall? Let's think compliance. Let's think communication. Maybe that person wasn't able to communicate as much. I said to my patient, how much did this person communicate to you? Or over 2 months, 10 minutes of communication. Is that an opportunity for me to investigate?
Hmm?
Is that an opportunity for me to look at the program and say, if for 2 months the program wasn't changed, is there an opportunity for why maybe the outcome was not what everybody in that party wanted it to be?
I
And in
love
order to get to that point, you've got to drop the ego, you've got to be self-aware.
One of the wonderful things I think when somebody's seen a lot of other professionals is I also think that, you know what, they could be more healed now than when they saw that other professional. So I see them as a blank slate immediately, and I won't take on board anything else they've ever seen from anyone else because I'm seeing a person on that day who could be a different person to the one that was consulting with other professionals.
Yep.
So we don't
Right
get
on.
influenced by the fact, or we don't have any apprehension that they've seen somebody else who's really, really well known.
Mm.
That's simply interesting. Tell us about that later. Well, let's talk about who you are today.
Yep.
Now, of course, you know that in most of the people who have failed with other people, perhaps not our most proficient ones, there tends to be a biomechanical trigger, a biological trigger to the problems that they're experiencing. What's going to be The number one thing that you will see that most people are having problems with, which produce their symptoms, lumbar spine flexion, your speciality.
Flexion under load,
Flexion under load. There it is.
anterior shear, compression. I mean, like as you say, it tends to be anterior shear and compression, flexion seems to be the most provocative what you see.
And what's the best resolution you tend to see?
Usually, it's some mixture of establishing and balancing posterior shear with stability.
Technique? Mm.
That is technique, right? So if
Yeah.
you're looking at balancing forces, stability, bracing strategies, we're looking at movement strategies. That's how we do it, right? Day to day. It's really how we outwork those strategies is how someone moves. And to say that someone, how they move doesn't matter tends to kind of just flop everything on its head.
That's why they end up seeing you, because it does matter.
Exactly. Exactly right. It does.
So that comes off the work you've done with Dave, which is the biggest solution to the chronic problems tends to be poor movement proficiency.
It tends to be, especially if someone's gone through multiple people prior to seeing us and everything else seems like it's been squared away, always go back to the details of their movement. So it's like if you're unable to find a way to progress your patient, coming back to that focus. How are you moving day to day? Because there's something provocative that you're doing that's causing you not to heal, because otherwise you're going to heal, right? We know that people heal. So you can't just do the same thing again and again and again and expect a different result. We all know what that is. So really it's understanding the nuance, like, okay, what are the let's talk about let's talk about two honest things that come up that people don't want to talk about. They're doing everything you tell them, they're not getting better. It comes out that when they go toilet, it's provocative, but they don't talk about it. It turns out when they have sex, it's provocative, but they don't talk about it. And so it's being able to provide a platform of communication between you and your patient so that they can and you can discuss these things because they matter, right? Pelvic extension matters when it comes to trying to rehabilitate a herniated disc or some type of problem with someone's back. And if they are doing that every night and they're not telling you about it or you're unaware of it, right? Or compression or going to the toilet or whatever exacerbates the issue and you haven't touched it, they're just two uncomfortable issues that people don't like to talk about that can be causing issues.
And that can
Technique
be very
matters.
similar from your experience as a strength coach in when people don't stick to the program. They've got that program which is specific to them that you've designed, load and frequency, and then they add something else to it.
Yeah, I say to my patients, I say everything's precise, everything's in there for a reason, right? I know for some people they're used to getting programs and it's maybe a suggestion or it's a program online. I said just because my intervention is exercise or movement based doesn't make it any important than any other intervention. Take it as a prescription and follow it literally to the letter. And the issue is if you do anything else or you change anything, it no longer is my program. And if it's no longer my program, I can no longer help you to the full extent I would have been before. And that's just the facts.
And that's the ability to guide a person, isn't it? And that's one of the things we really do so well is, do you understand what I've given you? Do you understand the parameters I've given you?
You're great with that. And you when you've talked that through with me before, and I've heard you on your social media profile talk about that, actually, doubling back with your patient and say it back to me, or saying, do you understand it? What does this mean to you? And you can save yourself a whole lot of grief and you can save your patient a whole lot of pain if you know how to do that.
Yes, they can sit there and smile and nod their heads and you say, now tell me what I just said.
Yeah. And it's absolute mush. So like,
Okay, let's
I
go
don't
back to the
remember.
first part. Yeah, because that's really creating the outcome you're after is they've got to leave knowing what you are expecting of them.
Yep. Yep. Otherwise, they don't do it. And I think, like I touched on, a lot of people will take exercises a little more flimsy because I don't know, I mean, it's not surgery, it's not pharmaceutical intervention. People want to go jump on a bed and have adjustments or be rubbed or be, poked with a syringe or go into surgery. And for whatever reason, they think that's the care, the standard of medicine. The minute you start using an intervention of exercise, maybe they think it's not as important. I'm not sure. But I find that sometimes people will take liberties where they shouldn't.
That's really superb insight because your Gen Pop person, you're really showing them that exercise is a branch of medical science. You're an exercise physiologist. What you had to do to get there It's science. It's
Absolutely.
not wishful thinking. It's grounded in solid reality rather than a philosophy.
Absolutely. And like I said before, when you start making, or you're told to make clinical decisions based off a philosophical understanding, you tend to run into issues. And it tends to lead you in a place where it's a dogma, it's a belief system. You know, people will say things to you like, I believe in chiropractic. And you're like, well, fantastic. It's not Jesus. Like, you don't have to announce that you believe in it. There are parts of the chiropractic profession that are absolutely have a foundation in science.
Mm.
And those are the people around the world that are getting results and they're doing it ethically, they're communicating ethically, and they're helping people in an honest way. And I have all respect to those people. But on the flip side, there are people that are unethical, doing things that are unethical and lack integrity and selling people on something that's not real.
And it's very rare those people, the patients, are going to see us. We are tending to find people who are looking for being involved in their own self-care.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, I've had family members where it's funny because some people say to me, never treat family. And it's an interesting one. I think what they mean is like never treat extended family because I think you're always going to want to help ones closest to you. But, I've helped extended family in the past and I've given them all the tools and they've turned around and just not wanted to do it, whether it's laziness or the fact that they don't believe in it as a part of legitimate medical science. It's unfortunate.
There's also a relationship between what it costs for them to see you and what it doesn't cost. I can remember in my early days, I cared a lot about certain lower socioeconomic groups. And so I would even throw in free attendance because I wanted to get more work with them.
Yeah.
Well, guess who are the ones who cancel the most and don't value your work the most?
Yeah.
Welcome to the ones you are not making respect you. And
Mm.
that's where the family aspect comes in because you're not charging them.
Yeah, it's too common, it's too normal. I suppose, people even doubted Jesus in his own town. So
Absolutely. It's all there, isn't it?
yeah.
And that's where the self-care comes in because even Jesus took his time off. There's the understanding that, yes, even those who are supposed to be the most resilient still take their time.